Back in 2015, crypto set out to change the world. Smart contracts promised a new era, a decentralized internet built for speed, security, and scale. Expectations were high, but reality hit hard. Blockchains struggled, transactions slowed, fees skyrocketed. For years, projects have tried and failed to build a truly next generation blockchain. Until now, a new player has entered the ring, and it's not here to take part, it's here to take over. Smashing speed records and outperforming every major EVM chain before it, quickly becoming today's most scalable, high-performant blockchain on the planet. Sonic was built with some of the brightest minds in crypto, and today, my friends, I have one of those minds joining us.
There isn't a chain that competes with us in terms of decentralized finance.
A legend in the space, known as the Godfather of DeFi, and the man who started DeFi summer of 2020, basically invented DeFi. The galaxy-brained Giga Chad, Cronje.
We're improving that network at such a speed that other teams can't really catch up.
In my wide-ranging conversation with Andre, we discuss decentralization, Andre's journey through Fantom and Yearn finance, and his building philosophy. Move quick, break things, innovate.
I've always had the vision/hope that our tech can be adopted by Ethereum. They will overnight reduce their storage requirements by 98%.
Today, Andre will give us some gems on Sonic, the features it has, and even his favorite apps being built over there. He's even going to drop a little alpha about something he's building himself.
No one needs wallets anymore.
So let's dive in, because this conversation will change how you see the future of blockchain.
That airdrop needs to reward our early believers and participants. And I want to reward those guys and make them loyalists, and I want to make them rich.
I am very honored and excited to have Andre with us today, guys. This is a good one. Make sure you watch until the end. You don't want to miss it. So I know that you built like a true DeFi application that was meant to be DeFi. For me, at my core, like heart of hearts, I'm a decentralization maxi. Like I'm really waiting for that moment that we have the ChatGPT moment of like decentralization of something, right? I want to see something that like is super useful, that people don't even have to know necessarily, like be bothered with, you know, like maybe some abstraction taken away. But that moment where like people just jump on the decentralized version of Uber and they realize to get to for the same service to go from their house to the airport costs $30 less because there's no middleman involved. You know, I think.
Look, I mean, that's inevitable. But I think the important thing, I like to always use the internet as an analogy, because at the end of the day, decentralization is following the internet blueprint, and it's going to be a decentralized internet. And if you look at original internet, right, when like the first wide area network came out, and it was still like direct peer-to-peer connections, you know, back then the kind of apps we have today are impossible. You can't have the Facebooks or whatever, because your bandwidth is limited to a few bytes if you're lucky. It's right. Super expensive. You need custom hardware even to connect to it. Fast forward a few years, you know, and every house has at least a phone line and a 56K dial-up modem, and it's still slow. You have a few kilobytes. You still can't do the apps, but you can start doing like forum postings or maybe an image share if you like download it overnight. And then that was fast forward another few years and you have ISDN, and, you know, all of a sudden you can start doing like Flash-based gaming. You can start doing, you know, ICQ chats, MIRC, these kinds of things. Fast forward another few years, ADSL, fiber, all of a sudden internet, cellular booms thanks to, you know, 4G, 5G. And now you can have the apps that we take for granted today, you know, whether it's social media apps, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, whether it's, you know, chat, Telegram, WhatsApp, doesn't matter. So, but the apps we use today were impossible back then because it cost too much. I mean, I remember internet bandwidth, you like 8 megabytes a month used to cost like 1,000 Rand or dollars or whatever. And, you know, now it's micro cents. Now, blockchains are going through that same transformation, right? Bitcoin was basically that very, very, very first raw network where you needed custom hardware just to even connect to it. Nowadays, we're at the point where you have a wallet on your phone, you have a wallet in your browser. So using that analogy, I'd say we're somewhere between the ISDN to ADSL phase. We're not yet at the fiber phase, and you see that with the new blockchains coming out. Sonic obviously being the kind of template that I followed for that. But each of these iterations is making the underlying hardware faster, that unlocks new apps. And I think that's why people often get frustrated, right? Because like we've decentralized gaming, decentralized social networks, even non-fungible tokens, NFTs, in terms of gaming items and stuff, they all make sense. But the underlying hardware make them prohibitively hard to work with and expensive. So in blockchain's current iteration, they don't make sense. Fast forward to what we have now, or what we're going to have in 5 to 10 years, and all of a sudden, it's going to be so cheap and so interconnected, you're not even going to notice. We're seeing sort of the original bridges now, layer 0, wormhole, whatever, that are connecting these sort of distinct wide area networks, and that's how it used to be as well. The internet was a bunch of distinct wide area networks that eventually got connected by an interconnected pipeline, and that's what we're seeing happening now as well. So if you follow that forward another 5 to 10 years, you're going to have a lot of stuff that's decentralized, but no one's even going to know it's decentralized. They're just going to know it's faster and cheaper. That's it.
Exactly.
But there's still a little bit of a roadmap to get there.
What, in your opinion, what do you think will be some of the, maybe that breakout app or something? Do you have any idea, what might be that ChatGPT moment of crypto blockchain decentralization?
I mean, that's the thing about foresight, right? If you knew Uber was going to be successful, you would have built Uber. If you knew Instagram was going to be the next big thing, you would have built Instagram. If you knew ChatGPT, you would have built ChatGPT. So I honestly, I don't know what it's going to be, and I'm not particularly focused on what it's going to be. I'm focused on how do I build that underlying infrastructure that enables the next generation of people to build that. And the reason I also say that is, the people that the current generation of apps, Uber, Facebook, whatever you want to call it, they grew up with the internet. They were born with the internet. Some of us are a little bit older. We weren't born with the internet. So because it's not sort of native since day one for us, we don't think in terms of that stuff. Like I still don't get Instagram or most social networks because, they didn't exist when I was a child. So I'm not particularly active on them. The people that grew up with them natively, the guys that grew up with MySpace, they spent their entire teen years thinking about MySpace, and then they started developing Facebook, whatever. So the builders that are going to be building those next generation decentralized apps, number one, I think it's stuff we can't even conceptualize because we weren't born with blockchain. And number two, I think it's going to be people that are, born within the last 10 years who grew up with blockchain to the point where they're always thinking about it. And then they come up with that stuff. I mean, at the same time, I'm still going to be hitting whatever apps I think are useful, but I do tend to, take a little bit of a more current market look than a, 5-10 year look. You obviously trying to build stuff now that's future proof, but not stuff that's that moment, if that makes sense.
And that's why building infrastructure makes a lot of sense. I think that you're quite known for kind of iterate quickly, move fast and break things, experiment kind of mentality, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. I mean, look, even before I got into blockchain, I was always working in R&D, and I was a rapid prototyping developer. So, we build stuff quick to get to MVP quick to test and see. So, long before crypto, I worked in telecoms. I did some telecommunication stuff across Africa, which actually was my first sort of foray into distributed systems, because often you don't have connectivity and stuff, but they still need to sync when they have connectivity. So you had to build quite custom stuff. That some of the old, IS and IN and SGGSN hardware stuff for networks that nowadays is, phone calls and SMSs. After that, kind of got into traditional banking, insurance, savings account, very, very, very vanilla stuff, not exotic, not derivatives, those kinds of things. But as part of that, that was sort of a big scaling time. That's like just when Scala came out as a language. I remember Kafka was just released in terms of like big data pipelining. That's when the word big data really started getting thrown around. So I spent a lot of time in that. and actually originally did a little bit of ML with credit scoring and stuff as well. But now during that time, there's a bunch of problems in those different fields, in finance, in distributed computing, in mesh networks, and in scalability, that every day, and this was around 2016, 2017, every day in the news or on Reddit or wherever I am, I read a new blockchain company that claims they've solved this massive problem that the normal, industry has suffered with for decades.
Would that be the trilemma, or is it something more
their
outside
claim is, there's always these insane claims by these 18-year-olds who have magically solved, world hunger, for argument's sake. And so I originally came in with a little bit of curiosity, but a lot of skepticism. And how I actually started and how I got my original sort of eyes in the space is during the ICO phase. For my own reason, whenever there was a big, company claiming a bunch of stuff, I'd go to their GitHub or whatever repo they had, and I'd actively go through the code and document what's in the code, and then match that with what are they claiming. And 99.99% of time, what's in the code and what they're claiming is so far removed from each other. It's as I'm sure you know.
So I run into this from time to time too when I'm trying to get an update on a project or something, and I go to the GitHub and they have a public link, but it seems quite dead. And then I say, hey, what's up? Like, you guys haven't written a line of code in 3 weeks, a month, what's up? And then they'd say, oh, well, a lot of the stuff that we do repo, private, and then we push the things to the public one once it's ready or something. Is that pretty normal practice and a reasonable excuse, or is that usually a red flag?
Nowadays, it's acceptable. Back then, it wasn't. And the reason I say that, back then, all projects were basically decentralization maxis. It wasn't, you weren't building companies, you weren't building IP, you weren't building around revenue structures, you were building primitives that were supposed to go in an immutable way on chain and is used by everyone. And even because my gold star at that point in time, is if I died the second after I hit deploy, that stuff needs to run without me.
I miss those days, man. Before 2017, every event I would go to, people were truly excited for decentralization, and no one in the room was really in it to it was never about. Before 2017, I never really went to an event where people were just yeah, bull run, we're gonna make I didn't even. I've been since 2013. I never even knew what a 4-year cycle was until I started a fund in 2017 or 18. I never even thought about it, just building and loving the idea. So
yeah, look, there's good and bad. I mean, obviously, we see a lot. We see almost zero pure decentralization projects nowadays. But I also don't. What you built back then was about open source ethos. It was about altruism, really, because you never expected to get anything back from what you released. You were just trying to build up the community and the ecosystem. Yeah. Nowadays, we're advanced enough to a point where it's not decentralized primitives. It's not decentralized apps anymore. It's just blockchain companies. It's just people building stuff on blockchain. Whether that's a financial instrument, a game, doesn't really matter. It's companies now. So a lot of the times I talk with teams nowadays, I actually tell them, don't lean into the decentralization. You're building a company. You're not building just an app. So have proxy upgradable. Don't go for immutable. Make sure you can make updates to your stuff. Sure, you still need good security practices, some time locks, some multi-sigs, these kinds of things. But those are really to protect you as a company against exploitation. They don't exist for the benefit of the user. So, nowadays the scope has changed, and I say that's not a bad thing, because revenue generating companies invest in more other companies or things they want to acquire or things they want to build out or grants that they need, and those financial incentives do help, but very different from how it was 2016, 2015, 2017, etc.
But maybe you could explain now with your new philosophy on the structure of Sonic Labs. Does Fantom even exist? Is that what the underlying chain is called? Is it Sonic Labs, and then there's Sonic the blockchain, and then is there a differentiation between the centralized company, which is Sonic Labs, and then the DeFi protocol, or the decentralized protocol, or how does that structure work?
I mean, look, that's still pretty standard in terms of most blockchains, where the blockchain itself, Sonic, that we don't have much control over. What happens, happens. But at the same time, some entity needs to be handling upgrades, improvements, feature requests, those kinds of things. And ultimately, that is what Sonic Labs do. So what Sonic Labs do is they maintain the software that runs the validators. That's really it. The network itself, and then it's standard. I mean, if the network decides they don't want to take one of those upgrades, not much we can do about it. Obviously, us being the only real participating entity does mean that we effectively act as CEO or whatever you want for the Sonic blockchain. And the goal was always that other teams get involved in, and we did fund actually quite a few teams to build other validators and other clients that people are able to run. Ultimately, though, we as our core at Sonic Labs we're improving that network at such a speed that other teams can't really catch up to parity to be able to release other validators. I mean, a reason why you have so many validators in Ethereum is because stuff happens in like 2-4 year cycles. So there's a lot of time to catch up to parity and then to sort of develop new stuff. In theory, we were hoping that happens. In practice, we're just moving at such a pace that I don't think really any other teams can keep up.
So let me let me just try to get this straight, make sure the audience understands and I understand. So what you're saying is that essentially right now, Sonic Labs controls the software that validators run, and it sounds like also runs a majority of the validators, so that when you need to make an upgrade or something breaks or whatever, you guys don't need to go have a big consensus thing where you have to call all the validators and get them online.
Well, we do. Our validating presence, I think, is about 8%. So like, it's not enough for us to really do stuff. But we obviously work closely with all of the big validators.
Yeah.
And they trust us. I mean, there's trust assumptions there, of course.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to say that in a bad thing. I'm just trying to differentiate what you meant, because Ethereum does move so slow. Like we as people who are holding bags of Ethereum, who are building on ETH ecosystem, I mean, we were supposed to have like 1 million TPS that was promised to us in like 2017 or something by like years ago, right? And now it's like on the 2030 roadmap or something like that. So it's really with all the TVL on chain, with how decentralized it is, the Vitalik's hardcore decentralization ethos, like. Yeah, that is a painful iterative process, which maybe never iterates to the point to where it's scaling like they say they want to, but I don't know if they will. So then I guess I just wanted to clarify. So you guys have 8% of validator control, which is not enough, but you're close to the rest of the validators. And then I guess probably in the future, is it running a validator permissionless, so anyone can come in and run validators?
Yeah. Anyone can boot up a validator, and the only entry requirement is the minimum stake, and that. Proof of stake actually has nothing to do with our consensus mechanism. It's actually just a anti-Sybil mechanism to make sure that people just don't boot up, hundreds of thousands of validators. And then, because if you do a one count per validator, then, they can overrun the network. But yeah, I mean, in essence, like Sonic, in practice, we wish it's a decentralized network. But I mean, right now, if you remove Sonic Labs, like I doubt it exists, and we're leaning into that. We're accepting that the new generation of blockchains need leadership as well as technical ability, right? I hate to rag on ETH. I love ETH. I believe they should be in a much better position where they are. But if you look at all of their main teams building validators, whether it's a Paradigm with RETH or Light clients or there's so many great clients, but all of those validator software, those guys aren't being the leaders of Ethereum. They're building the validators, and like that's their lane that they stick in. And we don't think that's enough nowadays. We think that the chains, like we said earlier, it needs to start looking a little bit more like centralized companies where there's.
I was just laughing because I picture. Vitalik, if you're watching this, I'm sorry, but maybe it's time to step up. I was just thinking about my country analogy, and even though each blockchain is running as a democracy, essentially,
it needs a president.
It needs a president, right? And when you look at you guys, or I'm not even sure. Like the thing is that most of these layer ones, the leaders are president. but they are super dev heavy. So like I know Ilya from Near, super fantastic guy, hardcore dev, super brain. I had great chats with him, but like he himself admits, like not the best president, right? And so I think that you're like, that's what people want to see. They want to know that like their leader, their president is going to come in, get Doge going, and and make things efficient and make things run and listen to the people. Right. Listen to the people that you're representing, because they're telling you what they want. Right. But if you're not going to follow that, then they're just going to go. And that's the beautiful thing that I love about the world that we're entering is back before crypto. The reason I got so hooked on it was because I was a big fan of what the Seed-Setting Institute was trying to do. And guys like Roger Ver and Charlie Shrem and Eric Voorhees and and Brock, and they were all trying to build like sovereign states and work with different countries and see if they could build the Seed-Setting Institute. And the idea that I liked about that so much was, imagine a world where governments compete for their citizens, right?
No, much better, obviously.
Massive paradigm shift. And that's what we're getting to see now with layer ones. And so, you should have strong governance, strong leadership, and listen to the people and build what they want.
100%. And I use that analogy a lot. Like I call layer one blockchains digital countries, because they are digital countries, and it's their job to implement the correct monetary policy or to implement the correct infrastructure to enable, the shops that come build businesses in their country to be able to flourish. Like a big thing for Sonic, I believe, which we are currently launching, is the fee monetization, where the incentives are misaligned in most blockchains, in that 100% of the fees go to the validators. You can cut that by 90%, and the validators are still going to make a ton of bloody money. So where we're going with that is 90% goes to the apps. That's simplistic. So 90% of all of those fees go to them, because they are the ones we need to be incentivizing.
Exactly.
And most blockchains don't have revenue structures that work for these companies building on top of them. I mean, it's basically, hey, you got a ICO at the start, make a ton of money, and then good luck to you. That's ridiculous.
I want to explain that too. So I'm not sure if you guys have like grants or something, but what I've seen grants, and maybe I'm not sure how you guys structure the grants, but like I see grants largely as the inefficient, let's say pre-Doge days of the US government, right? It was just like throwing money out to anyone who was interested, and a big waste of capital. And people, I mean, as a VC, I'm coming across people that, we got a grant from Sui, we got a grant from Aptos, we got a grant from Solana, we got a grant from Algorand, we got a grant from, and they're like $200,000 each. Like what? Like how are, like, it's not exclusive? No, it's not exclusive. They just gave us $250,000. Like what? Like that's crazy. So, but to your point, so the 90% rev share with dApps is crucial, because if you're going to build something that adds a lot of value to the network that you belong to, and you bring people there, users, attention, wallet, money, TVL,
you should get paid.
You should get paid. Those transaction fees that happen on the network, so 90% will go back into that dApp. And now what you've done is maybe you've taken something that didn't initially have strong token utility, and all you have to do now is plug that revenue stream back into token buybacks, and boom, you've got your first utility, your first revenue generating thing. So you can, I always used to rag on Uniswap for a long time, not because they were bad, they were great, but like they had zero utility for the token, and people say, oh, there was governance, but like let's be real with all the VCs and
zero.
There was no utility. So still trading at so it would incentivize people that actually bring a lot of usage to the chain to generate revenue, and hopefully, people watching, like, pay attention. What are the dApps going to be doing with this revenue share? Are they putting it in their pocket, or are they building that back into the economy they're making? And that's up for them to decide. But do ask that question, guys, when you're doing due diligence. After you created Yearn, and you got a lot of publicity about what you've done, and this kind of brilliant developer, innovating, building really cool stuff. I'm guessing that you probably could have gone to any blockchain and joined one of those teams. They would have been happy to have you. You chose to join previously Fantom, now Sonic. Curious why? And then
so that happened pre-Yearn. I'll tie this story back into why I actually developed Yearn, because it's actually connected. Pre-Yearn, I was so as the story way back when started, I got into the space as a skeptic. I started doing those code reviews. Those code reviews started getting a lot of attention. Teams then started inviting me to do exactly those private code reviews, so that I could then behind closed doors say if they're good or not. One of those teams at that time that was very hyped up was Fantom, and they had invited me to Seoul, Korea, to come do specifically that private code review. Sort of parallel to that, my skepticism had shifted a little bit. So having done all of these code reviews, I had realized that 99.99% of it is complete bullshit and people have no idea what they're talking about. But it still introduced me to, proper decentralization, proper blockchain, and what this could be. And that 0.01%, that was enough to hook me. I mean, I think any technocrat that comes into the space and, sees just even raw blockchain, it's going to be hard for you to get out of it. So I'd started spending a lot of time and energy on thinking how blockchains could actually work. And I'm obviously going through all of these code bases. So I had already a theoretical plan at that time for a high scalable blockchain. I had identified problems in existing blockchains and I'd see things that could have been improved. Back then, the project was called Snark Network. Lots of zero knowledge stuff. I'm very glad I did not actually launch that, because even today the zero knowledge tech isn't yet where it would have need to be for me to have launched that back then. Anyway, so parallel to that, Fantom team basically badgered me because originally I had never traveled out of South Africa or Cape Town, so I was like, no, I'm not going to Seoul, and I kept saying no.
Sorry, you never traveled out of South Africa?
No,
you were born there?
Yeah. Oh, South Africa is bloody wonderful. There's no reason to leave.
I was trying to pin it down, your accent, because I've had a lot of South African friends. Your accent's not exactly like theirs, but yours is more Dutch.
Yeah, mine's more Dutch. So my best friend as a kid was a native Dutch speaker in his whole family, and I spent probably 90% of my time there. So that's why my accent it's basically three parts. It's a little bit South African, and it's a little bit of Dutch, and then it's a little bit of American, just because of all of the television I watched. But yeah, exactly. It's that amalgamation. But technically, I'm just a plain old South African boer. But so I didn't want to, but eventually they badgered me to fly out. So I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. So I flew out to Seoul. And then it turns out it was basically a circumstance of accidents where they had this idea and they raised $40 million and they didn't actually know how to do the idea. They had nothing. They had no code. They had no theoretical tech, absolutely nothing. They had made all of these claims of a high throughput blockchain and it's 300,000 TPS, but it was just on a piece of paper written on an A4 page. They didn't have technical people. They didn't have coders, nothing. I'm not actually sure how that passed anyone's due diligence. It shouldn't have. Yeah. But so here was a unique opportunity. Here's a company that already had raised $40 million. I had my ideas for blockchain, and I was absolutely terrified by the idea of raising money. It seemed like a fit. In ways, I definitely regret it because, there was a lot of scammy stuff around Fantom in the early days. Some of their team stole from investors. Some of the papers they released were plagiarized. All stuff I found out after the fact, which, that overhang did not help for a very, very long time. And maybe I could have avoided that, but that was almost also exactly when sort of the 2017 market ended. So, chances of me having raised the funding to even be able to build out my network then, I think were low. Right. And even if I could, it would have been a small number. So I doubt I would have been able to get to any kind of real, endpoint. Anyway, so made the deal. I become their CEO at that time and took it over in private, not in public. In public, we kept all of the, original team there.
So that was pre-yearn, right?
All pre-yearn. This is like 2018, 2019. I wrote the entire original code base. We ended up getting Quan, who was the CTO there, fantastic developer as well. Igor, we built out a really strong team, and we were able to release the original, sort of Fantom blockchain based off of that. Now, at that time, dApps weren't a thing. There wasn't much happening on top of blockchains. It was pretty much payments, or I remember supply chain was big back then, and we did some POCs. Oh, there was so many POCs. Every other week there was a new pilot with some government entity that wants to test blockchain, but no one really knew what they were doing. We also didn't. Everyone was just kind of stumbling around. We had tech that we were looking for a problem to solve instead of solving a problem with tech. It was like anywhere where it was like, okay, blockchain sort of makes sense here. We just tried to shove that in. Needless to say, most of that stuff didn't work. So from the 40 million raised, they kept most of it in ETH, which means by the time I joined, there was like 3 million of the 40 million actually left.
Shit.
And it started becoming quickly clear that what I need to do is I need to figure out a way to make this 3 million more. And so what I started to do is every day and at the same time I wanted to explore smart contract and these things. And this was about the point where Uniswap had really started seeing traction. Compound was there, and a bunch of projects I don't even remember the names of because they don't exist anymore. Ava had just come onto the scene back then. They were still FLend. But what I was basically doing is on a daily basis, I would go check where's the highest yield, and it was like 5 to 8%. It wasn't huge stuff. And by then I had moved the treasury to stablecoin, so it was mostly DAI. And it wasn't DAI because originally I had it in the DAI savings rate, which back then was like 7%. But I started moving it around. So if I saw Compound was 8%, I was like, okay, withdraw it from Maker, put it in Compound. And then the next day I would do the same. And the next day I would do the same. And, this is back when fees were sub-cents because there was almost no activity. So you could do this often. And then I got to the point where I was like, okay, well, I'm a developer. This is wasting my time. So the first thing I did was I developed a smart contract that just on-chain aggregates all of the APIs for me. So that every day I can, instead of needing to open each one of these websites, I write a little, HTML script that connects via an RPC to the smart contract, and then I just get all of the APIs. So then all I need to do is I refresh that page, and I can see where's the highest amount, and then I go move it there. And now, obviously, the next idea is, okay, but if I already have the page, I can add a button that just moves it for me. So I ended up writing the first vaults that I can deposit in and then can move the money around. And that went well. That already grew the treasury quite a bit. And at that time, there was also more exotic stuff. So, the Curve 3 pool had been released that you can deposit in, and then there's extra yield on top of that. And then I started working with Mitch and Curve, and we developed, a few of the sort of yield-bearing pools, like the Aave pool where it deposits the native assets underlying, but you can still trade on top. And we were just basically looking for ways to maximize that yield. And, we got to some good numbers, like 15, 20%. But every day I still had to log in and I still had to click that button that said rebalance. And even just needing to click that button started annoying me. So I came up with an idea. Hey, what if every time people deposited into these contracts, it would automatically rebalance? So, okay, cool. So I started building that. But now I need people to deposit into the contracts. So I opened it up. So I released Yearn that allows anyone to deposit into these vaults. And every time they deposit, it automatically checks where it should go. And then it moves the money, which now means I have to do absolutely nothing. And the money is earning the maximum yield. And that's actually how Yearn was created.
And so I'm curious, the decision behind using Solidity, is it mostly just, or has our Solidity improved so much, recently that those serious risks aren't quite there anymore?
Look, those risks was never language based. Programming language is almost tribalistic in nature. If you ask a COBOL developer what's the safest language, he's going to tell you COBOL. If you ask a C++ developer what's the best language, he's going to tell you C++. If you ask a JavaScript developer, Python, you get the idea. Each one is going to say, hey, ours is the best. And why do they say ours is the best? Because they have decades of experience in it, and they know all the loopholes. They know all the pitfalls to avoid to make sure that their apps are safe. The Solidity as a language it's not like you write something in Solidity and then you get exploited. Like a lot of the exploits had nothing to do with code. It was economic stuff, or it was usability stuff, or it was reentrancy. Those things, doesn't matter what code you write it in, it's going to happen. A reason why a lot of those big exploits happened is because, Solidity and EVM guys were the ones that did those original experimentation. Apps that launch now, whether it be on Move, SVM, whatever, they've seen those errors that those guys made, and they've learned from it. And not the language developers, not the compiler developers, but the app developers learn from it and make sure they don't make the same mistakes. So that's why it looks safer. But in practice, they've just learned the lessons from the previous generation.
So
Second to that, well, I also want to qualify that another reason why we're still sticking with Solidity is because when Fantom originally launched, it was 60% go Ethereum. So I've always had the vision / hope that our tech can be adopted by Ethereum. And it's even something I'm pushing today. Even if they don't upgrade to RVM, if they just go with our database, right, Carmen DB, pure Merkle tree database, they can just install it like they would Level DB or Pebble DB or whatever. They will overnight reduce their storage requirements by 98%. So it'll go from terabytes to a few gigabytes, and they will increase their read and write throughput by over 800%. That's an 8 times throughput increase overnight by installing our database. But even that is a fight. Like, and I'm not. I'm at a point where I'm not necessarily willing to fight anymore, because I mean, it's like, why are you even saying no to this? Like, it's free. You can just use it. Like, it's based off of the same compilers. But I still had the hope of sort of contributing back to where we got our roots from. They've just made it impossible to contribute back. But at the end, where Sonic and even Fantom always was from day one, we decoupled the VM. So VM and consensus aren't tied together. Consensus is an ordering engine. So you can give it any transactions and it's going to order it for you. So it doesn't actually care that there's an EVM. We can plug in a SVM. We can plug in a move. We can plug in a WASM. It doesn't matter. And we probably will at some point plug in an SVM if we can get a little bit of the SVM and the EVM talking together. And if Move gets more, usability, we'll probably plug in Move. For the time being, I will say I do think SVM is better than EVM, specifically because they had the foresight to know that you need to identify the memory address you want to work with before you actually do any execution, and that allows you to do some really nice parallelizing things with the SVM that you can't do with the EVM. So a few of those things I definitely would like to still include in the EVM as well in any case. But ultimately you provide the, again, it's the country example, right? You want to provide the materials that the people building companies on you are the most familiar with, that have the most resources available. If everyone's used to building with bricks, you want to make sure there's bricks. If they're used to just layering concrete, you want to make sure you just have concrete. And it's ultimately provide the tools of the companies you're trying to stimulate. That makes sense.
So let's get into Sonic a bit. So it essentially, you hear mainnet's running. It is it's EVM. So can you use it with can one use it with MetaMask and Rabi Wallet and stuff?
Rabi, MetaMask, all of the standard EVM wallets, all supported, all integrated already. There's a long list. There's like 500 wallets nowadays.
Yeah, and you hear about when like a lot of people they're super surface level when they go and hear this layer one versus that layer one, and it's like, oh, this one does 6,000 TPS, and this one theoretically does 475,000 TPS, and this one's 275. So like, and then you guys come out and I'm not sure if it's actual 10,000 TPS or that's theoretical or what.
No,
but
so we've benchmark it again. It depends what you're measuring, right? Because like a transaction, is if I send you Ethereum on the ETH blockchain, that is a transaction, but that doesn't touch the virtual machine, and it only costs 21,000 gas. If I do a super complex smart contract transaction that touches a flash loan and lending and a swap and a deposit somewhere, all of a sudden, that's something that'll take a lot more resources, a lot more energy, a lot more processing time, and it'll cost you maybe 6 million gas. So what are you measuring? Are you measuring that super complex transaction, or are you measuring the raw transfer? And we decided, look, let's just provide metrics on everything. So if we take practical everyday Ethereum blocks and we run them through our validators, you're looking at about somewhere between 16,000 to 20,000 transactions per second. If we do the max complexity, so transactions that fill the entire block, then we can get between about 8,000 to 10,000 transactions per second. If you do raw transfers where you're just sending S to someone else, we can get to almost 600,000 per second. But so I think most people are kind of defaulting to the chainspec.app website, which they kind of has a measuring tool, but that's also easily gamifiable, right? Because I mean their measurement is how much gas do you have divided by your block time divided by 21,000. So they're taking a standard transfer transaction. But I mean, by Sonic's measurement, that's almost 600,000. Are you practically going to get 600,000 complex VM transactions through it? No chance in hell. But the 10,000 number, we are 100% in production scale. We know we hit those numbers with normal complex transactions, and we've hit higher than that. On chain, our peak was 16,000.
I think that user experience is so important.
I'll give a more comprehensive answer to your question, but I want to point this out is like on something like Ethereum or most blockchains really, the front ends are normally coded in a asynchronous pattern. So what that means is they'll submit the transaction to the RPC, and then they already assume they have to wait. So they don't even care about what they get back. They then start a little timer loop in the background that, like, every 100 milliseconds or whatever, asks the RPC, are you done? Are you done? Are you done? And eventually, a few seconds later, the RPC comes back with, here's the receipt, I'm done. And then they update the front end. The problem is Sonic is fast to the point where our RPCs are actually synchronous. Like, when you submit that transaction and it comes back with the 200 OK, it's finalized. Like, there's nothing further. So we actually have to work with a lot of our dApps to be like, hey, please throw away that shitty async patterns and just stick with the raw RPC. Because what we also see happening, you know, a lot of the delay in the dApps on Sonic isn't because of the blockchain. It's actually because, you know, they migrated from an existing EVM system. So they have these async patterns in the background. And then the time you wait in the UI is actually their little time wait thingy waiting. It's not the transaction getting back. Parallel to that, though, we also acknowledge, so like I said, we consider ourselves, you know, the government of this digital country, and we need to provide the tools to our developers and our teams and the companies building on us, so it makes it easier for their users as well. So the next things I'm going to mention are not released yet. The next one we're doing is fee subsidies. Now, this ties in nicely with that 90% feedback. So what that fee subsidy means is that anyone can pay for the gas fees of anyone else if they allow it. So the dApps in this instance can onboard all of their initial users without needing any gas. So, you know, their initial users don't need a wallet, they don't need gas fees. You log in via your normal social auth or passkey or whatever, and you can start using the app. Later on, if you want to get more complex, you probably need to get gas fees. Now, that works nice with the fee monetization, because if they're already getting 90% back, you know, their actual acquisition cost becomes tiny, because we're essentially paying them the subsidies that they need to pay for those users. So that already removes the I need gas in my wallet. Because I mean, in the going to Ethereum example, you know, the very first thing you know you need is you need ETH in the wallet, and that itself can often be a barrier to entry. So I mean, imagine if you had a normal mobile app, and the second they install it, the first thing you tell them is, hey, go set up a bank account. I mean, immediately you're going to lose 99% of your users. Then we have what we call native extraction, and that means that gas fees can be paid in anything, and it also means that you don't need everything on-chain becomes a smart wallet. So no one needs wallets anymore. You'll use normal social auth, username, password, email, whatever the hell your user wants or what they're used to. They log in that way, and that those combination of unique details becomes the thing that gives them access to their wallet. And then lastly, we have something called smart wallet state channels, which basically just means that you log on once, and then until you log off, we can use that login sort of session that you can just keep doing stuff in the app. You don't need to constantly be clicking approve or sign or any of that stuff. So I mean, once those are released, you know, you end up with a system where your end user never realizes they need a wallet or gas or anything. They're just working with your dApp.
Is that last feature? I remember when I was playing around with Decen and you know the BitClout, or eventually later become whatever. I don't know if you ever used it, but what I thought was like very interesting, and the first time I'd ever seen it in crypto was the kind of essentially account abstraction, or giving the app sign authorization to like sign on your behalf. Is that kind of the same feature they're talking about?
That's the same. That's the same. So but we even take it a step further, where you're not even authorizing. By logging in, you are already signing that app can be doing those things on your behalf, because it's app specific. Like if you want to go out of the app, so you want to go one layer down onto the blockchain, then you will still eventually need some kind of method with interacting with that, whether that's your own wallet or, you know, a custom smart wallet or whatever it is in the future. But our goal is really about optimizing for a given app, and we're also working very closely with all the apps that launch on us so that they can intercommunicate with each other as well. Because then technically the user never has to, you know, drop down to sort of the blockchain level. And ideally, I never want them to know about the blockchain level. You know, that's like expecting a user to understand TCP/IP. Like they're never going to manually open a UDP channel and send, you know, echo requests.
I always tell people that blockchain is infrastructure, and all the other infrastructure in our entire life, we never have to check if the infrastructure is sound. We just trust that it is. The bridges that we drive over, the foundation of the houses that we sleep in, all these things are just foundational infrastructure that we trust exists and works, and like that should be abstracted from the end user, unless like, you know, unless you're building something like the White House, and then you definitely want to make sure foundation is safe and all that thing.
Sure.
And then so the different levels, like if I'm doing a high value transaction, or if I'm using a DeFi protocol with billions of dollar TVL, you need that security. You need that interaction with chain.
But those are also the people that have the resources to have either the knowledge or hire people with the knowledge to do it. You know, so it's a different user. And I think for the longest time, most blockchains and app kind of try to group all users together, and I mean that's just not realistic. You know, you have to optimize your paths for your specific target demographic. I mean, I'm sure you've seen 100,000 crypto decks where they're like, oh, my total addressable market is 9 billion people, and it's like, dude, no, it's not. Like, just we're not off to a good start just because you said that.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, how's it going to have staying power and go beyond just the initial kind of incentive mechanisms that were offered?
So we had all of these conversations right at launch with the team, and the team wanted to kind of follow the model that I think has become pretty standard, you know, blast, bearer, whatever.
Yep.
Bunch of pre-deposits, be able to claim huge TVL as soon as you launch, lock up those deposits for X amount of time, and then you just stay really, really, really quiet when the unlocks happen and your TVL slowly drains to zero. Yeah. So I mean, if you go look at any of our charts, you know, DeFi Llama, whatever, you'll see it's the opposite. It started at zero, and that was a active choice and something I was fighting with hard internally to make sure we don't do any of that gimmicky bullshit, because those give you nice metrics at the start and doom you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Now you always have to try and build back to that point, and that people are always going to think you're a failure, versus if you showed nice organic growth, very different story. So that's number one. Then number two, the one thing that I was eventually beaten on internally was obviously the airdrop. You know, there's like a 200 million S airdrop. But the reason why I'm okay with that currently is because, you know, that airdrop, we're not incentivizing funds to come over, because that's locust liquidity as far as I'm concerned. It'll come and disappear. You know, we're not talking to anyone, VC, investor, fund, otherwise, to actually bring money over, because that airdrop needs to reward our early believers and participants. I mean, currently it's a 200 million airdrop for something like 700 million TVL. It's going to be a good payout, and I want to reward those guys and make them loyalist, and I want to make them rich, because they're going to stick with us then for, you know, eternity, and that's the goal. Where most of these teams, I think, fuck up is they want those big numbers so much that they end up giving it to the big funds and the big market makers and the big VCs. Those guys have no loyalty. They're going to come, they're going to take their fees, they're going to leave.
Value extracting. Yep.
So you shouldn't optimize for them. And, you know, that's why we were also very tricky in sort of how we give out where the money goes to in the airdrop, because the main thing for us is we are rewarding people that don't just come to a lending market and deposit 100 mil. We're rewarding people that come, do a little bit of trading on Shadow, and then maybe do a little bit of LPing, and then maybe go do a leverage position on Silo, and then maybe go use margin zero to like offset. And we're constantly giving them these strategies to play with, because we're more considering it like a tutorial of the network to show you all of the stuff you can do here, so that then you want to stick around later. And so the other thing, you know, we're really focused on currently on decentralized finance and the composability thereof. And we've got a guy internally, Johan, who's doing an absolutely phenomenal job, who's constantly looking for ways to leverage the composability between these different teams and get them working together and get them like doing cool stuff that shows user to play with. Because we need to use this attention span right now to show people what they can do and why they want to keep doing it. So, you know, obviously right now APRs are much higher than they will eventually even out to. I mean, even on stuff like stablecoins, you're earning 60%. That's supposed to be somewhere between 5 to 10. So we know it's hyped up right now. And I hope most people also know it's hyped up right now. But at the same time, if you come in early now, you get the benefit of that sort of airdrop reward we're doing. But you're also going to be making so much money earning these APRs that by the time you get there, even if we didn't do an airdrop, you will have made the money in any case. But the goal is really the stickiness. It's getting people to use the stuff and also teach them, you know, why this is useful for them going forward. Will we see a drawdown after the airdrop? Potentially. I think realistically, because some of that capital is going to be mercenary, right? There's nothing we can do about that. But I want to get enough people in there that, one, recognize the speed, that makes it hard for them to go anywhere else. Because that's the one thing. If you've really used a fast blockchain, it's frustrating going back to something else. And like, you only do it then if you're absolutely forced to do it. And then number two, at the same time, it's showing the apps that come over to us that they have such a nice experience with us, and that we work so hard, because all of our apps, there are kingmakers. We're not out there saying Sonic is amazing. We're out there saying Shadow is amazing, Silo is amazing. All of these guys building on us are amazing. Use them. Because ultimately it doesn't matter that Sonic's underneath. It doesn't matter that our token is S. What matters is that you use those guys. So we're also trying to just use this attention span to show these teams like how much we want to be involved, help them with their composability, help them with DeFi ideas, get them working with each other, so that as we unlock these other features, the fee monetization, the fee subsidies, etc., it's so sticky that we're forcing them to be sort of native to us, that they almost can't go anywhere else, because all of the other chains, fine, they might get a $2 million upfront grant, but they're earning more in fee monetization with us, and we're enabling so many features that are native to only us. For us, the main thing right now is that wallet abstraction. That's why that's our North Star for this year. Because even if you now let's say you download that app, right, and the very first thing it tells you is, hey, install this other app that's your wallet, you've already lost 50% of your clients.
Yeah, and it's such a pain in the ass to connect. I mean, like when I have to connect MetaMask on my mobile device,
it's cancer.
Going between windows and it doesn't work. And
absolutely atrocious. I know. I use some mobile devices as sort of like two-factor, three-factor, whatever authentication for like safe signs and stuff. So then I need to go do that manually every time. I dread it. I'm like, I'd rather give me a ledger or something to play with than that. It's beyond painful. So that's why, like we acknowledge that a lot of our apps are handicapped because of our infra. I mean, that's not up to the app. The only way the app can have a user experience that doesn't have any wallets is if they basically do everything centralized, and they save private keys in a database, and they fund it, and then they abstract that away from the user. I mean, it's doable, but you're opening yourself up to exploits. I mean, if someone then accesses that backend and they've got all those private keys, it's over. So again, it's the layer one's jobs to facilitate that. And Solana, for example, did a great job, because Solana already said, well, this whole approve pattern, let's get rid of it. I mean, that in itself is a huge UX improvement already. The fact that you can just click buy and you get the bloody thing. But that works on Solana because the Solana layer one focused on making sure that's how it is for their apps. It's not the apps that do that. So at the same time, it's our job to make it to the point where they can just install a mobile app and then they can just click buy or whatever. But now at the same time, if you click that buy button and that goes through Apple Pay, Google, Samsung Pay, they're going to take their haircut. There's really nothing you can do about that.
I just looked at your X just now and saw that you Bitcoin on Sonic, like that's pretty cool. So not specifically calling out this swap X, but let me know which ones you're really excited for. For those who are watching, maybe for them to go, use, try out. Maybe they're bullish on the economy, the ecosystem, whatever. Like.
Look, I think there's two answers there. The one answer is always, there's sort of the anchor tenants, the Aves, the Compounds, the Uniswaps, the Curves of the world. They're there and or deploying, and they're always kind of safe to use. Me personally, I obviously respect those teams immensely, but I'm not excited about it. Where my excited is in teams that are trying new things. Because for the longest time, people just got scared of trying anything because of exploits, which is fair, but we're not going to be pushing the space forward if we're constantly afraid of exploits, unfortunately. So where I'm excited are the apps that are trying new things. Now, the reason I'm adding that big disclaimer in front is because obviously those are the ones that are the highest risk. So I don't necessarily want to be like, actively like, hey, go put all of your money in there. You need to understand it's safe. It's dangerous. You can potentially lose all of your funds, etc. But the ones right now that I'm really enjoying is Shadow. They're kind of iterating a lot on my originally VE33 model that I released with Solidity way back when that, became Airdrop, Velodrome, all of those apps, Ramses, etc. So they're trying some new things on the tokenomics and economics, which I think is really cool.
Is that Shadow? Is that a DEX?
Yeah, it's a DEX. It's an AMM.
Okay.
They're not doing too much on the AMM side. They're mostly iterating on the tokenomics side, but I do think there's a lot of room to still do tokenomic innovation in this space, which we haven't currently seen.
1000%.
There's some stuff on the AMMs as well that I've recommended for them to add. So, for example, their primary pools are concentrated liquidity, Uniswap v4, a variation thereof, v3. The problem with concentrated liquidity is it actually still uses Uniswap v2's constant product AMM formula, the x times y equals k. So you can still add other curves on top of that, like the stable swap curve or my x3y solidly curve to make those quoting better. So they need to start doing that stuff as well. But they're a team actually willing to try and innovate, which I love. So that's Shadow, that's doing great. Metropolis Dex, also an AMM, but they're leaning into DL MM. So
yeah, like
closer to like order books or more
Meteora is doing or whatever.
Yeah, Meteora exactly is a great example.
Which one was that?
Metropolis Dex.
Metropolis, okay.
But they're trying to do that on chain. They've got some nice tokenomic stuff happening. They for example, where VE33 pays you out in the token, so Shadow pays you out in Shadow if you're an LP instead of your fees. These guys convert all the fees to USDC and then pay that out kind of as a dividend. And I like people that try new things, new models. So they're doing great. Silo they're a lending market. They've come over. They're testing a lot of new ways to interact with like third parties and composability and building on top. And they do one-to-one lending markets. Been really enjoying them. Margin Zero, something launching soon, which is a new options. There's Vertex and Boomdex, both trying new implementations of perps, which I've been watching closely. There's Strike. There's a lot of DeFi stuff. I'm sure there's more. There's some aggregators on top there. Magpie, which I also quite enjoy currently. Eggs Finance is the big one, which is actually working out pretty well so far. I'm actually quite surprised. They haven't collapsed. I actually don't think they can collapse.
It's a little Ponzi. Good Ponzi. Good Ponzi.
Good Ponzi. Yeah. Snake, which is trying a new implementation of rebasing.
Wow.
There is Hubble, which is a new kind of tomb fork. There was something else, the Hand of God or something like that. That's also a tomb fork. Those ones, very high risk, most likely will collapse. Be very careful. And then the last category, which is sort of the new emergent one we're seeing, which is gaming, decentralized gaming, which I think are doing a phenomenal job. I do recommend everyone to just go try out these guys, because you don't need wallets, you don't need gas fees. Like, they already do a lot of the cool stuff that I've said. You wouldn't know they're on Sonic. You will just have a super easy gaming experience. You do have to take into consideration that this is like my original analogy. This is ISDN, ADSL stage. So it's like the old Flash games. Like a lot of the ones I play, I actually get super nostalgic on the stuff I used to play in like computer cafes and things. Fate Adventure, I think, are doing a phenomenal job. Sacra, Sacrafi. I fucking hate that game. It is brutal. It kills you every single thing you try and do. It's like those really old school choose your adventure style games where you make the wrong choice and you're just dead. I die so much. I hate it. But then an hour later, I'm playing it again. And then Est4 Kingdom, which is done by the Paint Swap guys, is also that's comfort food. That's like Stardew Valley or that kind of stuff that you just play and relax. Paint Swap is another, that's our sort of local NFT exchange. Those guys are always trying new things. I'm really impressed by that team. I think they need so much more exposure and attention, and I'm always looking for ways to kind of get more eyes on them, because that's a phenomenal team. But yeah, I mean, there's a ton, and there's new things launching every day, and yeah.
Obviously on Solana, it's been they've gotten all of their adoption and attention and DEX fees, everything from meme coins. What is your opinion on meme coins? And as someone who's running a new layer one ecosystem, which have previously seemed to bring a lot of attention to a chain, I honestly, I could tell you a handful of things that are really being. I mean, there's more than that I'm aware of, but like, let's just say that most people perceive right now Solana as like the trenches chain, and for better or worse, it's taken it to a super high valuation, lots of attention, a crazy cult-like community. I think people aren't so happy with it right now because their bags are down 95%. But curious to get your thoughts on meme coins, and if you're welcome them with open arms on Sonic, or you kind of think that it's toxic, or
look, so meme coins are essentially an attention economy, right? And the thing about an attention economy is it's a lot of attention for a few weeks and then it dies out. I mean, we've seen it with every big meme that's ever happened, right? Like it's for 2 weeks, you see it absolutely everywhere. And then all of a sudden you never hear about it again for the rest of your life. Now, that being said, I like to split meme coins actually into 2 categories. The one that I call community coins and then the one that I call meme coins. Now, the real meme coins, right? The ones everyone always talk about, whether it's Doge, Shiba, Bonk, doesn't matter. Like those ones weren't launched overnight and became successful. You know, that was teams of people grinding through years of shit and faced challenges together. And like the meme was the unifying factor. You know, that's the thing that everyone, that's kind of the banner that was being held up during those wars that everyone fought under. So when those guys walked out and finally those tokens started getting a lot of attention, and those token prices went up, that was rewarding a community that has been stuck in the trenches for years. That's not what we're seeing now. What we're seeing now is a bastardization of that, where you have a little group of insiders that are just pumping a ton of liquidity so that it shows up on Deck Screener and whatever else, and then other people ape in and then they dump. That's taking a very, I think, almost pure and beautiful thing and just, you know, making it a toxic thing. And I mean, we've seen that in every industry, right? Like even DeFi, like the original DeFi was pure and beautiful primitives, and then people just ended up building scam number 44 on top of it to extract as much money as possible. And that'll always keep happening in this unregulated, decentralized world. It's impossible to avoid. But so in terms of those community coins, and you'll see, for example, there's a Meme Mania competition currently on Sonic, but it's only for those communities that have been in our trenches since Fantom days. You know, we're not promoting new things being launched or stuff like that, because we want to reward those people that stuck through the hard and the sometimes horrible times. So that's why, you know, I'm in 2 sides on it. I do think that if you look at it from that perspective of a community coin that, you know, is representative of hardships they went through, I think it's absolutely beautiful. If you talk about something that was launched today and tomorrow no one's talking about, that's garbage and needs to go away.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, that's. I think there's some validity to then, you know, like Murad's thesis around these community and cult like things. I'm not saying that his picks are legit or whatever, but I'm just saying that like he came out with some fundamental things that those of us who've been on for a while understand, but for the masses, they didn't really understand that like you actually want something with longevity that shows a track record, that shows that they're not gonna disappear in a few weeks. So that's cool that you're doing that for the guys who've kind of OGs in the Fantom ecosystem. Is there anything else that's maybe like you haven't told anyone, or exclusives or anything that you want to share?
Exclusive, I don't know. Look, there's a ton of new, really cool primitives being launched. We are definitely currently kind of hyper optimizing towards DeFi. So I do think right now there isn't a chain that competes with us in terms of decentralized finance. We have more prototypes and new stuff happening there than what I've seen anywhere else. And we're optimizing it for it, right? Obviously, I have a new thing that I am launching on top of Sonic as well. It's a combination of a lot of my previous work that I've sort of been sampling, and it's why I'm in the US. You know, I'm actually setting up C corps and stuff.
What's the contract address, sir?
No, that's not happening. That's not happening. I'm specifically, it will not launch with a token day one, because I think apps that launch a token day one, they're irresponsible, because you're optimizing for people to put as much money into your protocols as possible. Now, if you're compound fork number 4 or Uniswap fork number 23, that's fine. Put on your token. But at the same time, the liquidity you're attracting them aren't people trying to play with new innovation. Those are people who are going to farm that token and dump it as quickly as they can. So I think it's irresponsible to do that. If you launch new stuff, unless the token is implicitly part of the economics. And I've only had one app like that, and that was Keeper Network, where the token was required for the system to work. because I did experiment obviously a lot with how tokens and apps actually interact with each other. In this instance, I'm probably not going to have anything like that from day one. DEXs and decentralized finance have kind of been catching up to centralized finance, but we haven't been able to get there. With some of these features we're releasing on Sonic, I think we're going to get there. So I think within this year, I'll be launching an exchange that'll compete with, you know, Coinbase, Binance and stuff, but fully decentralized.
Wow.
Offering as much, you know, in terms of perps leverage, trading accounts, feature functionality, even later on, if we get the licenses, you know, money on, off, money transmitter licenses, etc. So, because, you know, it's not just about, a big part of why we have a builder focus is, you know, I'm also an app developer. So a lot of the features we built on Sonic is pain points that I experienced while I was building on other blockchains. So it's things that I firsthand know needs to be solved. And a lot of the features I have built on Sonic and am rolling out now are specifically because they enable me to release this sort of what I consider the next version of decentralized finance.
That's awesome. We'll stay tuned for more info on this secret project. I'm definitely excited. I mean, it took me a long time to really like actually pay attention to Hyperliquid. All of a sudden, I didn't know about it. All of a sudden, I see it pop up in the top 100. I'm like, what the hell is this token? Usually when you see something out of nowhere pop up in the top 100, my first instinct is like, this is some sort of like North Korean
scam or something,
Korean rug or something like that, you know? So I ignored it for a long time. Like, there's no way that this thing is like, but then, you know, come to find out, like it seems quite legit. I don't know. Yeah. So yeah, I'm excited to see what yours is. But Andre, thanks for your time, man. Really appreciate you coming on. Is there anything else that you want to add before we end this?
I'm sure there's still a ton more, but I mean,
let's
was
do
a fun conversation at least. We'll have to do a few follow-ups.
Part 2, yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it.